Week one arrived and ended with an Arkansas victory. Let's break it down today on episode 42 of the Woo Pig Weekly podcast. We are in the home field studio, and this is your weekly source for all things Arkansas Razorbacks. Episode 42 is brought to you by Home Field, home of premium vintage collegiate apparel. You can use for promo code Variety Sports in all caps to receive 15% off your order. They really know how to work the college athletics game with all the different Arkansas apparel they got with traditional hogs and hogs of pastimes and different things of that nature. So go check them out today, and you can use that promo code, get 15% off your order thanks to Variety Sports Network. And so we'll jump into week one. You know, it got here finally. Arkansas got a big win against Western Carolina, 56-13, where this was a great game for KJ and our passing attack. As you know, that was one thing that Western Carolina really said, that they were going to try to force Arkansas to beat them with the passing game in KJ's arm. Well, you know what? He stepped up in the pocket and did that for Arkansas as he finished this game 18 of 23, completing 78% of his passes. Threw for 246 yards, 3 touchdowns, carried the ball 5 times for 11 yards and another touchdown. So he had 4 touchdowns on the day for Arkansas, and he hit several different receivers throughout this game. And I think this was just a good showing by Arkansas, and, you know, a definite improvement in the passing game for Arkansas compared to last season, where they struggled a little bit.
Yeah, man, no doubt. This was a crazy game that kind of went a little bit differently than I expected. We had our little live preview show before the game, and I did expect KJ to throw for 200 or 250. That was kind of my prediction. I didn't think they were going to let him go much over that, unless they wanted him to really start padding stats or something like that. But anyways, so everything there went about as expected. I thought the highlight was that he started the game 9 for 9. I really thought Danny Enos and KJ were well prepared for the defensive scheming that was going to be up against them, especially just due to the fact that Western Carolina really sold out to stop the run. And we'll cover it in a minute in some of the rushing stats from the game, but this was not a great run game for us at all. So maybe a small bit of concern about that we weren't able to really just push off the line very well from an offensive line standpoint and run the ball just straight down their throat. But they had 8-9 guys in the box literally every single play. And it really showed in the first half how KJ was able to kind of slice up the coverage, because it was a lot of man coverage. They really did a good job just hitting those receivers in stride and getting the ball out quickly on some of those blitz packages. So overall, I thought the pass game was almost perfect. I didn't see a lot of holes in it at all. And Western Carolina kind of played right into that.
Yeah, that's very true. I think it was a really great showing by KJ, especially, you know, showing what he can do in this Dan Enos offense, you know, compared to the Browns offense last season. And, you know, talking about our quarterback depth, you know, you got to talk about Jacoby Criswell, who, you know, played in this game in the fourth quarter, completed his only 2 passes for 28 yards and 1 touchdown. And he also carried the ball once for no gain. But, you know, he seemed poised when he came in the game as well. You know, was able to deliver a shot to the end zone, you know, for a touchdown, you know, right out of the gates. You know, I think this is good, you know, a good sign for Arkansas down the stretch. If something were to happen to KJ, you know, that I have confidence in Criswell, and I think his showing in this game just kind of solidified that a little bit for me.
Yeah, and the stats really don't do it justice, man. He really looked like he belonged out there. He didn't look like he was any type of flustered. Granted, it was, you know, kind of garbage time at that point. We pretty well put the game away. So I mean, it wasn't a lot of pressure, which that's exactly what you want. But he looked comfortable. He looked poised. Obviously, his 2 throws were on target. And they really didn't even let him just get out there and sling it too crazy. Had a couple plays called for him just to kind of see what he was capable of, and he was perfect. Honestly, he looked great, but they were kind of running the ball a lot, just trying to get that clock melt down. But he looked very comfortable. I didn't see any signs of nervousness, jitters, anything like that. So I think that is a testament to just his experience level coming in as a transfer from North Carolina, and then how well he's already kind of learned the offense and just kind of developed into his own quarterback play. I mean, he looked a little bit different than KJ out there, just the way he was kind of reading things. But man, like you said, I don't think he's a step down much at all. If for any unfortunate event, KJ has to sit out a game or 2 later on.
Yeah, I agree with that take. That's, you know, was very good to see out of him, very confident. And, to know that he can lead this offense if we need him to. And potentially, that you could be looking at next year's starter if KJ decides to enter the NFL draft after the season. So, really good things from the passing game. And then when you flip over to the rushing attack, not necessarily how we thought this game would go. But as Seth said earlier, you had 8, 9 guys in the box almost every single play because, like I said at the beginning, they really wanted to make us beat them with our passing game and KJ's arm. And so they really bottled up Rocket, not to say that he had a bad day stat wise, because he had 15 carries for 42 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he still scored twice, but he didn't have, one of those spectacular 100, 120 yard games that we thought he might have against one of these smaller teams. He averaged 2.8 yards per carry and only had 2 receptions for -4 yards. So they were getting him behind the line when they were trying to swing it out to him on kind of those swing type plays. When you talk about other running backs that got some playing time here, AJ Green had 4 carries for 22 yards, where he averaged 5.5 yards per carry. Isaiah Augusta, the freshman, got 4 carries in this game for 20 yards, 5 yards per carry average. Rashad Dubinion got 3 carries for 15 yards and 1 reception for 1 yard. And then you had Dominic Johnson get 3 carries for 14 yards. So between those guys, they all split those other carries that Rocket didn't get pretty evenly across the board, and all had pretty decent averages per each carry they got. So I think that's a good sign to see that we have that depth there that we can spread the ball around if need be. So I think this was, not an ideal showing from the running backs, but like we said, they were stacked in the box, wanted us to beat them through the air, and we showed that we can do that. So that might change, say, Kent State's game plan this week, knowing that, we can spread the ball around. It may balance out what we can do against them, and we'll cover that in our preview in a little bit. But, this was a game where I know Pittman said that he would like to see some angles adjusted on the offensive line about how they're blocking guys and things of that nature. So, anything you want to add there with that rushing attack we had this past Saturday?
Not a whole lot. Just kind of like you said, got some things to clean up from an offensive line perspective. I actually thought the line did a fantastic job in pass protection. KJ, he got a couple of QB hits, a couple of QB hurries. I can't remember if he got sacked. I don't think he did. There was a highlight play kind of early in the game where a linebacker came through the line unblocked, and he hit KJ extremely hard and bounced right off KJ. And if you haven't seen that highlight, go look it up because it's almost comical how much of a brick wall KJ is back there. But anyways, I thought the line played very well in pass protection. I just don't think they were getting very much push off the line in run blocking. They weren't getting to the second level from a blocking standpoint. So definitely some room for improvement on the offensive line and in the rushing attack. And then I think you'll see some of these running backs see holes a little bit differently. They're running behind some different guys on that line, so they're going to learn the tendencies of that line a little bit better and understand where those holes are going to open up more. I think this was probably a good game to have some struggles and realize where your deficiencies were, where you had a game where you were able to pass the ball so well. So it obviously didn't impact us on the scoreboard. So not a bad thing to have these struggles early on and identify some areas to correct. So it's not the best from a stats perspective, but I don't have a whole lot of concern. I think they'll get things corrected, and I really think the pass game, now that there's a little bit of highlight film out there for some of these other teams to see, there's those offenses are going to work off each other. Teams are going to have to respect our pass game a lot more than maybe some of them thought they would have to with all these new receivers, new tight ends, and everything. But KJ's obviously built a lot of chemistry just in camp. So I think these next few games, you're going to see a lot more success from the run game.
Could agree more with that. And, speaking of those receivers, as we jump over to our receiving stats here, KJ really spread the ball out through to several different guys, especially on that opening drive, first couple of drives, he was able to hit several different guys throughout this game. And so I think it's a good sign, because I think we both had that question mark going into the season, really at the receiving core, who's really going to step up and be those guys? And are we going to have guys that can step up? And from what we saw on Saturday, I'm pretty confident in our receiving core that they could be a pretty solid core that Arkansas has had in a while, especially just across the board and not having just one dominant guy. First guy you got to talk about is Jaden Wilson, guy that's been here, a couple seasons already. had in this game kind of broke out in this first game, taking, I think it was like the second or third play of the game, you know, 60 yards for a touchdown. He had a total of 3 receptions for this game for 83 yards and that one touchdown at the beginning of the game. Flashed some of his speed where he was able to outrun some defenders on the back end for that touchdown. And you had Andrew Armstrong, the guy we kind of talked about that was probably going to step up and be KJ's go-to target this season. And, you kind of see that here with he had 5 receptions for 78 yards and a touchdown. So he had the most receptions out of all of our receivers, showing, I think that confidence KJ had to, just put the ball out there for him. You had Isaac Tesla have 3 receptions for 66 yards and a touchdown, a beautiful pass in the end zone from KJ that he was able to place that ball perfectly for Tesla to go up and get. You had Luke Haas get 2 receptions for 19 yards. He had the very first pass from KJ. It was good to see him get involved early. Only 2 receptions, but I think that on-field chemistry will develop with time as, the season progresses. You had Davion Dozier with 1 reception for 14 yards for a touchdown. He caught the touchdown pass from Jacoby Criswell. And you had Isaiah Satania for 2 receptions for 14 yards, and then Tyrone Broden 1 receptions for 3 yards. Broden is a guy that Pittman said in press conference this week that he's a guy that he wants to get going. He's such a big body guy that being 6'7", that we need to get him going, especially, in some end zone roles. I think that where he could be very crucial. But overall, I was pleased with the way the ball was spread around and how our receivers looked in this game.
Yeah, me too. Obviously, they weren't going up against SEC cornerbacks or anything like that. So there's a little bit of disparity there. And I think whenever we were running slant routes across the middle, we had a little bit of a speed advantage against linebackers, obviously. So that definitely went well for us. But even considering that, I really thought Andrew Armstrong, Isaac Tesla were doing a great job of getting separation. That was one thing we struggled with last year with our wide receiver cores, having guys get open. KJ did a decent enough job fitting some tight balls in some windows there, but he had an easy day here. Wide open receivers. I mean, he was hitting them in stride, but it wasn't even hard because they were so open. So I thought the entire receiver corps did a really great job at creating separation from their defensive backs and linebackers. Andrew Armstrong, yeah, he had the 5 receptions. I think he ended up with like 7 or 8 targets total. So he definitely was kind of the go-to guy. Didn't look like it at first. It kind of took in that second quarter for him to really get going. But once he started catching the ball, I think KJ started really looking his way even more. So overall, like you said, I was very, very pleased with the way the receiving corps has already built some chemistry, it seems like. That was definitely a question mark for a lot of people. I think this game answered a lot of questions. Obviously, it's just one game, can't base too much off of it, but it's really good to see this much development this early on, especially with guys like Luke Haas, Isaac Tesla, those guys. It's definitely a good thing to see early.
Yeah, that's one thing that, I think everybody was questioning in the beginning of the season and going into fall camp was, well, who are those guys going to be stepping up? Because we had no returning wide receivers that got significant playing time from last season. Well, you kind of got your answer on Saturday. You saw guys step up and show flashes of why Sam Pittman brought those guys in from the portal. Now we're going to jump over to defense, and this was another, just that side of the ball as a whole, I was very impressed with. I think that was another question mark going into the season. How good could this defense be, especially on the back end and the secondary? Well, to answer that question, this defense and the secondary came away with 4 interceptions in this game. You had Brad Spence, freshman linebacker, kind of made his welcoming party real quick when he had a pick 6 where he returned an interception for 85 yards and a touchdown. You had Dwight McGlothern return an interception for 16 yards. Hudson Clark grabbed him an interception, as well as Jaden Johnson. So our secondary really was going after the ball, really seemed to have a nose for the ball. If this is just a sign of, of what we could see this season, a tremendous improvement from last year. Like Seth said earlier, this was just one game against, not an SEC opponent. But I think this bodes well for what we could see as they continue to develop that on-field chemistry, and we, continue to play together and learn this defense as a whole.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me was obviously being able to capitalize on those turnovers. We scored, I think, off of 3, maybe 4 of the interceptions. Can't remember. But anyways, outside of that, the best thing I saw was we weren't dropping potential interceptions, things like that, where it was going right through a defensive back's hands. Whenever we had the opportunity to steal an interception, we were making that play and we were actually catching that ball. I think I only remember one scenario where a ball very likely should have been picked off and a defensive back couldn't come down with. I can't remember who it was, but I really only remember like one instance of that. So we really capitalized on the opportunities that the Western Carolina offense gave us. So I thought that was a good thing, not making too many mistakes on defense and then capitalizing on your opportunities there. So that was one of the highlights for me. And then just from an overall defensive back standpoint, I think there's been a ton of improvement made. Granted, it's just one game. Can't get too excited, but Dwight McLaughlin's interception, he read the defense so well. The ball wasn't even thrown his way. We talked about this in the previous episode, actually, kind of going into that he's such a good player that he gets involved in plays that aren't even his target. This was a prime example of that. He was covering a guy on a flat route and there was like a corner out route that he kind of basically read the quarterback's eyes and dropped back into that passing lane and made that interception. It wasn't even his man. So it's great to see those guys already recognizing plays like that this early in the season. I think that's only going to get better and better as it goes on. Obviously, the competition level is going to get higher, but I think we're going to improve each week. So I really expect us to have a huge turnaround from a defensive back standpoint this year overall.
I agree, especially I think the movement of Hudson Clark to that safety position away from kind of the defensive back role was really successful, especially, he doesn't have to try to keep up with some speedy receivers. He's got the whole play in front of him where he, can really read the play and attempt to go make that, the stop if he needs to be. And especially it gives him the option, like we saw him grab interception in this game. So I really think he's moved and shifted and transitioned really well into that safety type of role that, he should see a lot of playing time in this season.
Yeah, he laid the wood on a couple of run plays too that really stuck out to me. He was in there getting a hat on the ball and in the right place at the right time on several runs as well.
And then in addition to those 4 interceptions, Arkansas added an additional turnover where they had one forced fumble/fumble recovery where Jaden Johnson, just came in, squared up with a guy, made the tackle, forced the fumble, and then freshman TJ Metcalf came up with a recovery on that one. So, another great play in the secondary of these guys. That happened to be a broken play where a guy got on the edge, started to make a line down the sideline. Jaden Johnson just squared up with him and, put the hit on and then forced that ball out. And TJ Metcalf was in the right spot to grab that fumble. So, it's great to see these defenders actually making the plays and thinking about it, not just kind of going for a big hit and actually fundamentally getting ready to, take a defender down or an offensive player down.
Yeah, that was awesome. I know the whole team was going crazy whenever TJ Metcalf came up with that recovery. I know his first game as a Hog, so everybody was hyped up and pretty excited for him. I know he got a lot of helmet hits on the sideline coming back in and stuff. So he was hyped up and the whole team was hyped up from that. It was an awesome moment.
As we round up our recap here, our top players on defense, the first one here is a transfer that he seemed to be everywhere on the field, was Jaheim Thomas, a transfer linebacker from Cincinnati. He had 8 total tackles with 4 solo tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, and 1 pass deflection. Really good showing by him. I think he's a guy that definitely brings a lot of, experience and just veteran experience to this defense, especially in that linebacker room that is fairly young besides, himself and, Antonio Greer, a guy that didn't get to play this game. So, very good to see that he was able to come out and have a great game 1 for Arkansas. And then another guy you want to talk about, another Jaheim Singletary, this time in the secondary transfer, 5-star transfer from Georgia that, redshirted last season. He had 6 total tackles, 4 solo tackles, and a half a tackle for loss. Another guy that, really came in over the summer and was able to pick up this defense really fast. And he kind of showed it in this game where he is able to read some plays and contribute a lot to this defense. And then another defensive back guy, Jaden Johnson, 5 total tackles, 4 solo, 1 interception, and that forced fumble. So a really good showing by him where he was able to get out there and just show why he was on that field for defense in this game. So really great outing by him. And then a guy we talked about last week on, could have a big game for Arkansas is Chris Paul Jr. He was a guy that had 5 total tackles, 1 solo tackle, really good game, except for, he had that targeting call that, I think that was a very clear call where he kind of just went in there full speed and he laid a hit on the quarterback, but, ultimately we saw why he got that call. It was really crowning the helmet to that guy.
Yeah, it was a really strange play because he didn't even come in and like really try to like hit him or push him with his hands. I actually think he would have been better off if he'd have pushed him with his hands. At the last second, right when he hit him, he just kind of ducked his head down and this was helmet to kind of chin contact with the quarterback. So I think it was just kind of a mental lapse there. I don't think he was actually trying to go in there and harm the quarterback or anything like that. I think it was just kind of a mental lapse, and he just ducked his head right before he hit him, and it just ended up being kind of coincidental targeting. But overall, he had a pretty good game. Unfortunately, he'll have to sit out the first half of the Kent State game. So I'll be watching to kind of see if Jaheim Thomas really steps into that leadership role even more. He had a great game. I think he can really turn into a stud player for us. He looked fantastic out there. I felt like we were seeing him on every single play. Even if he wasn't the one making the tackle, he was basically the next guy there that was going to make the tackle if Singletary or Johnson else to tackle. So it was fun to watch him play that whole day.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. That'll be a good learning experience for him, a good take, a young player that, going into his first season as a full-time starter for Arkansas, there'll be some learning moments, things like that he's got to learn. But, I think in the end, he's going to turn out to be a really good player this season. Another guy that came out and really, showed what he could do, flashed his speed, was on special teams, Isaiah Centenia. Ever since he came to Arkansas, he was really raved about his speed. He's 2 sports. He runs track as well. So, he's fast. Well, in this game, he started to show some glimpses of that where I think it's just a matter of time before he breaks a big one at some point during the season. In this game, he had 2 punt returns for 51 yards and 2 kick returns for 46 yards. So I think this, as he adjusts and, learns this role more as, he's the one guy that slotted in on both those as the starter. There's no or somebody else. It's him. Coach Pittman's excited to see what he can do. And like I said, I think it's a matter of time till he just breaks a big one at some point this season, maybe even multiple. Who knows? I think it's the ceiling is very high for him.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. They're got called back from a block in the back. I think even if that block in the back hadn't happened, he'd have still had, I think it was around a 50 or 60-yard return on its own. It was a great return that just unfortunately got called back. But he actually had a really great game, even better than his stats show from a special teams perspective.
Yeah, very true. So as we wrap up this week 1 recap, we're going to cover a few, just give you the results across the SEC here. A few of these games that happened over the weekend or early in the week as, college football kicked off. On the Thursday games, Utah beat Florida 24-11. You had Missouri beating South Dakota 35-10. And then as you jump into Saturday games, you had Tennessee beating Virginia 49-13. Kentucky beating Ball State 44-14, Ole Miss beating Mercer 73-7, Auburn beating UMass 59-14, Mississippi State beating Southeast Louisiana 48-7, Georgia beating UT Martin 48-7, Texas A&M beats New Mexico 52-10, Vanderbilt beating Alabama A&M 47-13, Alabama beating Middle Tennessee State 56-7. And then you have North Carolina beating South Carolina in that Saturday night matchup, 31-17. And then on Sunday, you had Florida State beating LSU 45-24. So overall, not a bad weekend for the SEC. A few games that, could have went a different way, but, we'll just have to see as the season goes on how they improve. But any other thoughts before we wrap up here?
Well, the biggest takeaway for me is that LSU really struggled against Florida State. They didn't look like the LSU that was on the field late last year. Granted, game 1, you're going to have some jitters, and I think they unfortunately kind of ran into a buzzsaw because Florida State was amped up, ready to go. Florida State really played well in that game. So LSU looked beatable to me. You and I talked about it after that game a good bit, that Jaden Daniels did not look good. There's no other way to put it. He had a horrible game. So unless they make some really quick turnaround improvements, which I think they're capable of, don't get me wrong. I think they are. I think LSU is a good team, and I think they're going to be a tough game to win. But they did look beatable. I think if they do kind of have a slower start and struggle to make some of the corrections that they need to make, I really think that week 4 game is a lot more of a winnable game than maybe some of us thought earlier in the season. So that's one thing I'm going to be kind of watching for the next couple of weeks is how LSU turns around. Obviously, Florida State was a top-ranked team as well, so it's not like they lost to somebody they should have beat, a non-conference opponent or something like that. So I don't think it's panic mode at all, but they definitely looked beatable. That's the only way to say it.
Yeah, that's true. Before season started, a lot of people were saying Jaden Daniels is easily the top quarterback in the SEC. That puts some doubt in my mind there. I mean, you look at how KJ performed. To be fair, it was against Western Carolina where Jaden Daniels played Florida State, but if he was really the top quarterback in the SEC, he would have had a better game than he did. So we'll just have to see as the season goes on. But, as we all know here in Arkansas, I think KJ is easily going to be that top guy in the SEC, and probably one of the top guys in the country. There's some competition after week 1. We saw some guys break out and, show what they can do. But I think KJ is easily up there with some of those guys. But with that, we'll take a quick break here, and we'll be back with some Arkansas soccer news.
You know what I like? I like to be comfortable. I also love representing my favorite sports teams. And in the Clutch, I am able to have the best of both worlds. In the Clutch Apparel is your one-stop shop for all things sports. They have officially licensed gear from all your favorite teams and players from the NHL, MLB, NFL, and more. They have sports classic tees from yesteryear and beyond. Check out their full website in the link down below. When you enter the promo code Variety Sports, you get 10% off everything site-wide. Feel comfortable with your sports apparel and go over to their website now at intheclutch.com. And don't forget to use our code Variety Sports to get 10% off.
And we are back here with Arkansas soccer news as we're going to cover some games over this previous weekend, an upcoming matchup here. So we'll turn it over to Seth here and let him cover some Arkansas soccer news.
All right, man. Appreciate it, Caleb. So Arkansas soccer took on Milwaukee on August 31st, where they picked up another win, 5-2 in this match. Ava Tankersley scored the first goal for Arkansas 4 minutes into the match. So kind of the same MO there where they got started really fast and got a goal early on. Then Arkansas keeper Sierra Cotillard scored off her second penalty kick of the season. So it's kind of cool to see that. That's 2 so far this year for Sierra Cotillard. Bay Franklin scored off of a free kick that was headed twice off of Emily Hauser. And then Morgan White added the 4th goal of the match in the 52nd minute of the game after freshman Avery Wren's ball from the midfield pulled Milwaukee's goalkeeper out of the box. Casey Laurie scored the Hogs' 5th and final goal in the 84th minute, so just kind of right there, right at the very end. And Arkansas finished the match ahead in shots 14-6, so that's always a good stat line to see. They turned around on September 3rd to play North Carolina, where unfortunately they dropped this match 3-1. Arkansas's only goal came at the 22-minute mark by Anna Podagil. So an unfortunate loss there, but North Carolina, if I remember correctly, was ranked number 4. I can't remember that off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. So a top 10 matchup. So a very tough game there. So unfortunately, we lost that one, but you got to shake that off and move on and keep on kind of getting back to that quick scoring offense tempo that we've really been able to have success with early on in the season.
It's very true. And then they were number 4, so it's Arkansas scheduled some tough matches at the beginning of the season, which is not a bad thing. A lot of them to get through some growing pains faster than if you had just several easy wins in a row before conference play starts. And it's not going to get any easier coming up tomorrow. They got a match with Clemson, who's ranked number 9, still another top 10 team, which, Colby Hale's really putting his team through the test here at the beginning of the season to really, help some of these players get on the same page, especially since there's a lot of new faces on this squad. You really want to get them on the same page at the beginning of the season as fast as possible. And, I think this is probably a good way, have several top matchups where, they're going to have to figure out the ways to win, best way to play together, and those type of things. So I think this is something you're going to only see this team grow and get better as the season goes on. especially with the talent that's on this team this year that, Kobe Hale is able to recruit and pull out of the portal and things of that nature. So I think this is something that you're going to see improvement from this team as the season goes on throughout the rest of the season. Then we'll jump over to Arkansas Volleyball, where, this was we mentioned it last week. They had a big matchup at home against Wisconsin. I was able to catch that match on August 30th, and it was a really close match where Arkansas unfortunately fell to Wisconsin 3-2. They were really close on that last set, trying to get it, really close, and unfortunately it ended on a bad note. And but I think it was a good fight that they were able to put up, and then they came out on the next day and lost 3-0 on the 31st. I mean, that's I got to give them a little bit of easiness on that, as they played a hard, tough match that previous night. So, probably a little gassed in this second match on the next day. So, I think this squad's going to be solid this season. They came out the next week to beat Arkansas. Arkansas beat Colorado State 3-2, and then they also took down Michigan 3-2 as well. So they've got some matches coming up on the 8th versus College of Charleston and Western Kentucky. So a couple of different matches on that day, one at 1 o'clock and one at 7 o'clock. So, this team's getting started here, and, conference play will begin before you know it. And
yeah, so, I hated to see that we unfortunately lost those Wisconsin matches, but I think it was a good gut check, just to kind of understand really where you stack up against the number one team in the nation right now. So not necessarily a bad thing to lose those. You really get an understanding of where you are as a team. And then it's great to see the bounce back wins right after that.
Then we'll jump over here to our preview of the game preview for this week 2, where Arkansas is going to take on Kent State on Saturday, September the 9th at 3 p.m. So middle of the afternoon game here. For Arkansas, the spread for this game starts at Arkansas favored by 38. So another big spread for Arkansas, with an over and under of 58.5. So I think this is a game where Arkansas could likely see a cover here, especially that over, if you just look at what we're going to talk about here in just a minute with how Kent State's week 1 went. I think, that shows this could be a favorable matchup for the Hogs in week 2. And as we'll jump into that, Kent State scored 6 points in week 1 versus UCF. And they also allowed 56 points for UCF. UCF is a team that's led by a former, SEC coach with Gus Malzahn. After, being let go by Auburn, he went down south, down to Florida. So he knows what he's doing down there. But Kent State just didn't really have a chance here in this game, where they only had 240 total yards for the entire game. They had 145 passing yards, 94 rushing yards, and they allowed a whopping 723 yards of offense to UCF, 334 of that passing, 389 rushing. So I think this is a good sign for Arkansas, and I think we could see a repeat performance from KJ in this game, especially if they're able to allow 334 passing yards against UCF. What can KJ and these receivers do but build more chemistry between them in this game? So looking at this, what kind of game do you think we could see for Arkansas in week 2?
Yeah, definitely kind of the same MO from this previous week around the passing game. I think the one thing I'm going to be watching for the most is how well we're able to develop the run game. They gave up 389 rushing yards, so that bodes well for Arkansas kind of getting back into their rhythm from a rushing attack perspective. Is a little bit hairy on who's going to actually be getting those carries, as there's been some news come out that Rocket Sanders could be limited. If he does play, he may not even play. I think he had a little bit of a tweak and then has some bruised ribs potentially. I'm not sure what all of that is actually officially correct. So we'll see exactly who's going to be getting those carries, but I think that's where we're going to hopefully have the biggest spot of improvement against Kent State, is getting the rushing attack going, getting them in rhythm, getting the offensive line kind of in their groove. From a rush blocking perspective, I think they, like we said earlier, they did a great job in pass protection. I think they have some improvement they could make around run blocking. So that's going to be what I'm watching for in this game for sure.
Yeah, very true. And I know if you know anything about a Sam Pittman offense, he's not going to let struggling offensive line play last for long, where that's shifting up some of those, starting guys, or just figuring out, like we talked about earlier, the angles that they need to take on those blocking plays for especially open up holes for these running backs is something that I think we'll see improvement pretty quickly from this team. And this will be another game that they can work on that and hopefully get just, the right plays and the right players in there making the best blocks that they can. So now we'll highlight some key players for Kent State based on their week one. So you look at their quarterback, Michael Alamo, very similar size to KJ, 6'4", 225. Not near as great of a performance, though, where he finished the game 12 of 31 for a 38.7% completion rate for only 145 yards through one interception. He also had 7 carries for 23 yards. He's a guy that he spent his previous 2 seasons at Purdue where he played sparingly, not a ton of playing time, transferred over as the starting guy for Kent State, at least for week one. I don't know if we could see a different guy week 2. That's to be determined. But as of right now, this is a guy that they ran on the field week 1. So nothing, jumping out at you right there. It's just, I think he's a guy that we could see his interception total jumping up. If this defense performs anything like they did last week, it's something that, could be good for Arkansas. I don't think you have to worry about them hitting some big plays on us with, 38.7% completion rate, and that's against UCF. So you go up against an SEC team, I can't expect that to be much better than, what he had in that game 1. You jump over and look at their running back, Gavin Garcia. He's 5'8", 187. He had 18 carries for 45 yards. So not a ton of running room there for him either. He finished 2022 last season with 35 carries for 211 yards and 1 touchdown. Their main running back from last season ended up transferring out to Ball State. So, he had to step into that role this season. And then their leading wide receiver from last week, Christian McCray, he's 5'10", 163, had 3 receptions for 61 yards. He also had 1 carry for 3 yards. So is there anything particular that stands out to you about these guys for Kent State?
Well, I think the one thing that does kind of stick out to me is that you don't want to let them have a bounce back game. That's going to be kind of what they're targeting, to come back out and play significantly better than they did against UCF. So they may have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder to kind of have some better success. I think you're going to want to have the defense come in, rough them up early, try to set the tone early. I think that's something that we didn't do as good of a job of against Western Carolina as I would have hoped. Obviously, the defense played just fine. The one thing I think I didn't see that I was hoping to see more of was quarterback pressure, especially early in the game. We got some later on in the game. I think we started to wear their offensive line down a bit. But early in the game, it didn't seem like we were getting consistent pressure on the quarterback and rushing throws. He was just making bad throws, honestly, and we were taking advantage of that, which that worked out well for us. But that's going to be one thing I'm looking to see a little bit of improvement on, is the defensive line being able to get quick pressure. So if we can get a little bit better in that department against these guys, I think we'll be able to kind of put up some similar numbers that UCF put up on them, get them to throw a couple of interceptions, turn the ball over a time or 2, and then just really limit their offensive production. I really look to us to kind of copy what UCF did. I think there's going to be some good film out there for us to emulate from their game 1, and that really shows how to beat these guys, and I would expect us to utilize that.
Yeah, I think that's a good take. It's something that, it is Kent State. It is what it is. It's going to be a game that, Arkansas should win pretty easily. We'll have to see what happens here. And so as we jump into that, a little injury update for Arkansas. Like we mentioned earlier, Rocket Sanders will be limited if he plays. He tweaked his knee a little bit in that game 1. Little side tip of, another reason I think we need to stop the War Memorial games. It seems like every time we go down, somebody gets hurt, some type of injury, something like that. But we won't let that stop us here. Whereas we've got a tremendous running back depth. We've talked about that in the all off season, especially going in this game. We've got, 4 other guys that, saw playing time in game 1 that can easily step up. Personally, I think we should just rest Rocket, let him get healthy, in time for conference play, not risk anything. I think the other guys on this roster are 100% capable of easing that load and taking care of, the games while Rocket sits and rests and recovers. But as we get more information, Sam Pittman said as of this afternoon, this press conference, that there's no updates for him yet. He said he was hoping to find out more about Rocket, but said that, he had a little knee swelling. He said he doesn't think it's a lengthy injury, nothing that'll last or, nag him all season. So that's good to hear. But as we get more information, we'll let you know. So just stay tuned into our X page, and, we'll keep you updated with news as we find out. Another injury update for Arkansas linebacker Antonio Greer will make his debut on Saturday after he missed game 1 with an injury. This is going to be, I think, a good thing for Arkansas, especially as we mentioned, Chris Paul will have to miss the first half of this game due to that targeting call. So another guy that can step in, an experienced guy along with Jaheim Thomas, and, be able to just have added depth to this linebacking room. Another guy that we were going to talk about, not injury related, is Keon Stewart. We found out early Saturday, he was arrested last Friday due to reckless driving. And he is back with the team now. He was not on the travel bus with the team this weekend, but Pittman has said he has 5 community service events that he has to attend. So that's to be expected, some type of, punishment for him, with, the instant getting arrested. That's not a good look for any player, especially representing the university. So, for him to still be on the team, I think he should probably consider himself lucky. So some people might not be as easy on a guy in that situation, but he is back with the team, so he could see his debut this weekend as well. Just another thing that, a few updates we have here. And so we're kind of go into what we think could be a big week for this running back room. So what kind of split could we see in carries if Rocket is out of this game? When you break it down, I think we could see DeBinion and Green split carries, have Johnson get a lot of the goal line work, and then have Augustive sprinkled in throughout. He had a decent outing in his first game as a Razorback, with him being a freshman. So what do you think the running attack could look like this week if Rocket is out of this game?
Yeah, I really agree with your thoughts on kind of DeBinion and Green splitting most of the carries. I think you may even lean a little bit heavier towards Green. I don't know. It's really just kind of going to depend on how physical the offensive line is, if you need more of a punch style back or more of a speed style back. But I think you're going to see plenty of work through all 4 of these guys. I could actually see, kind of all 4 of them having fairly equal carries between all 4. Just the way it's Kent State, you're going to be wanting to get reps, especially if the score kind of becomes out of hand in the second half, things of that nature. I think you're really going to have some fairly equal carries between all these guys. The one guy to watch for is obviously the freshman Augustive, where I would expect us to try to redshirt him. So you want him to get as much experience as you can in the few games that he plays in. If you unfortunately can't redshirt him due to injuries later on in the year, that's one thing. But you let them play in 3 to 4 games and then let them keep their red shirt until the next year. So I could see maybe him getting maybe a few more carries than some people are predicting just due to that. But we'll just have to see kind of how the game goes. I think a lot of it is going to be dictated by the game flow.
Yeah, I think so too. That's a good take there as well. So I think it's just going to depend on, could be who has the hot hand in this game, who comes out and is seeing the holes better, being able to see the field, different things like that. So it'll be interesting to see that. That is a thought I didn't think about, is Augustive could be one of those guys that you try to redshirt. You could see the potential loss of Rocket after this season, which would leave a running back room of DeBinion, Green, potentially Johnson, and Augustive. So, it'd be a good idea to have a guy kind of waiting in the wings in a sense if you redshirt him. But we also do have a lot of talent coming in next season too, with Braylon Russell from down in Benton. So, maybe not the worst thing if you don't redshirt him. I think it just depends on how this beginning of the season goes. And, like we said, Coach Pittman doesn't think this injury to Rocket is super serious. So, let him get healthy, let some of these guys get some good reps in the beginning of the season as we get ready for conference play. And like we said, we got LSU week 4 coming up here in 3 weeks. So I want to make sure everybody's healthy and ready for this game. I think we could see like we said earlier, we could see a big passing attack for this game. I would like to see Tyrone Broden get more involved in this game. He's a big body receiver that, I think just get him reps on the field. I think he came in late in the summer, but also I think Pittman said he had some injury issues that he couldn't necessarily practice a lot with the team, which probably would have, pushed his chemistry back with KJ not as far along as some of these other guys that got to go through spring practice, fall camp, all those things with KJ. And I think you're just going to see in this game that chemistry between these guys continue to get better. Him hitting those marks, maybe not as many incompletions, just as, week one, you got the rust knocked off, and kind of know how guys are going to be able to catch the ball in stride and be able to set them up and place them in the right spot at the right time. So I think this could be a good game for KJ, as he, starts that quest towards a Heisman, hopefully for Arkansas.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I think it'll be maybe a little bit more of a balanced approach than we saw in week one, just if the offensive line does make some improvement on run blocking. I think they're going to really that's going to be the first focus, and then I think KJ will be following it up, and I expect him to come out very similar to he did against Western Carolina. 9 for 9. I think at one point he was 12 of 14. So I expect him to have a really good pass completion rate against these guys as well. So those will be my things to watch for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think Pittman comes out early in this game and really tries to establish that run game right at the beginning, especially after the struggles we had last week. That's something he clearly said he wants to do, is be able to get this run game started fast and be able to, that's going to be key for Arkansas this year, especially, if we have some close games trying to run out some clock, that's going to be key for Arkansas. And so as we wrap up here, we've got some upcoming events for Arkansas. As we mentioned before, Arkansas Soccer will be taking on number 9 Clemson on the 7th at 6 p.m. And you have Arkansas men's tennis getting their season kicked off in the Racket Club 12 prize money event going on from September 8th through the 10th. You have Arkansas Volleyball at the College of Charleston on September 8th at 1 p.m. Arkansas Volleyball at Western Kentucky on September 8th at 7 p.m. Then you have tennis participating in the Wichita State 5K Fall UTR on September the 8th as well. And then as we round out the week with Arkansas football versus Kent State on September 9th, this Saturday at 3 p.m. Back home in Northwest Arkansas in Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium. It should be an exciting week for Arkansas football. Can't wait for Saturday to get here, but I think it'll be a good weekend. So don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And thank you for listening to today's episode of Woo Pig Weekly, and we'll be right back here with you next week.